Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the crystal halls of the Galactic Confederation headquarters, her soft shoes making no sound on the polished floor. Around her, dozens of alien species hurried past, tall, blue-skinned Zephyrians with their flowing robes, stocky HFY warriors in their dark armor, and graceful Selenites floating just above the ground. Elena had spent 15 years in these halls, and she knew every corner, every meeting room, every quiet spot where tired diplomats could rest. Today felt different, though. The air buzzed with tension, and worried voices echoed from conference rooms. She stopped at a large window that looked out into space. Stars twinkled in the darkness, and she could see ships from 100 different worlds docked at the station. Some were sleek and beautiful, others looked like floating cities, and a few resembled giant insects made of metal. Still staring at the stars, Elena? She turned to see Ambassador Kresh, a Zephyrian who had become a close friend over the years. His blue skin had darker patches around his eyes, a sign of stress in his species. "Just thinking," Elena replied. "The emergency session today, it's about the border conflicts again, isn't it?" Kresh nodded, his long fingers drumming against the window. "The HFY are pushing into outer rim space. 3 colonies have reported attacks in the past month. The Hegemony Alliance is demanding action." Elena sighed. This was the same pattern she had seen dozens of times. Someone would push too far, others would push back, and soon entire sectors would be at war. The galaxy seemed to run on conflict, with brief moments of peace in between. "What does Earth want us to do?" Kresh asked. "The same thing we always want," Elena said. "Talk first, find a solution that works for everyone. Nobody has to die for this." Kresh's large eyes studied her face. "You humans are strange creatures. In 30 years of contact, I have never seen your species start a fight. Even when the hegemony took your trade routes last year, you just found new ones." Elena smiled sadly. "Fighting is easy, Kresh. Any fool with a weapon can start a war. Making peace, that takes real skill." They walked together toward the main conference hall. The corridors grew more crowded as they got closer. Elena could hear angry voices in a dozen different languages. When they reached the hall, she saw why. The room was split into clear groups. On one side sat the Hegemony Alliance, proud species who believed strength was the only truth that mattered. Their leader today was War Commander Thaxon of the HFY, a massive creature whose scarred armor told the story of 100 battles. On the other side were the Outer Rim territories, smaller, weaker colonies who had banded together for protection. They looked scared, and Elena could understand why. The HFY had crushed stronger opponents than them. In the middle sat the mediators, species like humanity who tried to keep peace between the two sides. Elena took her seat next to Captain Marcus Chen, who commanded the human medical ship, Harmony. Marcus was younger than Elena, but his calm eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much suffering. His ship spent most of its time treating wounded from various conflicts across the galaxy. "How bad is it?" Elena whispered to him. "Bad," Marcus replied quietly. "The HFY hit a refugee camp yesterday, mostly families trying to escape the fighting. We pulled 200 survivors out, but—" He shook his head. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She had seen the reports from Marcus's medical missions. Photos of burned colonies, children with wounds that would never fully heal, entire species displaced by wars they never wanted to fight. War Commander Thaxon stood up, his massive form towering over the other delegates. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. "The hegemony grows tired of these endless talks," he said. "The Outer Rim colonies sit on resources we need. They are too weak to use these resources properly. It is natural law that the strong should take from the weak." Several Outer Rim delegates jumped to their feet, shouting protests. Elena could see the fear in their faces mixing with anger. "This is exactly the kind of thinking that leads to unnecessary death," Elena said, standing up. Her voice was calm but carried clearly through the hall. "War Commander, your people are strong, yes, but strength used only to hurt others makes you know better than wild animals." Thaxon's red eyes fixed on her. "Humans," he said with disgust. "Always talking about peace, always trying to solve everything with words. You are weak. Your ships carry medicine instead of weapons. Your colonies grow food instead of making armies. If someone attacked your worlds tomorrow, what would you do? Ask them nicely to stop? Some of the other hegemony delegates laughed. Elena felt their mockery wash over her like cold water, but she kept her expression calm. We would do whatever was necessary to protect our people, she said. But we would try every other option first. War is not just about who wins, War Commander. It's about what you lose in the process of winning. Pretty words, Thaxon replied. But weakness disguised as wisdom is still weakness. The meeting continued for hours. Elena proposed compromise after compromise. Maybe the hegemony could share the resources instead of taking them completely. Maybe they could set up joint colonies where both sides worked together. Maybe they could establish trade agreements that benefited everyone. Each idea was shot down by the hegemony delegates. They wanted conquest, not cooperation. The Outer Rim delegates grew more desperate as the day went on. They offered tribute payments, territorial concessions, even limited mining rights. Nothing was enough for the Kethvar. As the session ended, Elena felt the familiar weight of failure settling on her shoulders. Another day, another conflict she couldn't solve with words. Captain Chen walked beside her as they left the hall. You did everything you could, he said. Did I? Elena asked. Sometimes I wonder if we're just delaying the inevitable. Maybe some species only understand force. Maybe, Marcus replied. But that doesn't mean we should stop trying. Every life we save is worth it. That night, Elena sat in her quarters reading reports from across the galaxy. Human ships were everywhere, medical vessels like Marcus's Harmony, cargo ships carrying food to hungry colonies, research stations studying everything from alien biology to star formation. Humanity had spread across the galaxy not through conquest, but through service. They built hospitals on worlds ravaged by war. They grew food on planets where the soil had been poisoned by conflict. They offered their knowledge freely to anyone who wanted to learn. Other species saw this as weakness, Elena knew. Humans didn't claim territory through force. They didn't demand tribute from weaker civilizations. They didn't even seem to have a real military, just ships that helped and healed and built. But Elena remembered Earth's history lessons. She remembered reading about wars that had torn her home planet apart, weapons that could destroy entire continents, conflicts that had pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. Humans had learned from those dark times. They had chosen a different path among the stars. But that didn't mean they had forgotten the lessons of their past. Elena's communication device chimed softly. A message from Earth appeared on her screen, just a routine diplomatic update. But buried in the routine language was a single line that made her blood run cold. Intelligence suggests hegemony forces are positioning for large-scale offensive operations against human colonies. Recommend increased vigilance. Elena stared at the message for a long time. Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance, beautiful and indifferent to the struggles of the tiny creatures who flew between them. Somewhere out there, War Commander Thaxon was probably planning his next move. And somewhere else, human families were going to sleep on peaceful colonies, trusting that their government's policy of peace would keep them safe. Elena hoped that trust would not be betrayed, but deep in her heart, she felt a cold certainty that the galaxy was about to learn something new about humanity, something that would change everything forever. The attack came without warning, like a storm from clear skies. Captain Marcus Chen was in the medical bay of the Harmony when the emergency signals started flooding his communication system. Red lights flashed across every screen as desperate voices called for help in a dozen different languages. Captain, his communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Park, ran into the medical bay with her face pale. We're getting distress calls from New Eden, Terra Nova, and Harvest Moon. All three colonies are under attack. Marcus felt the world shift around him. Those were human agricultural worlds, peaceful farming communities that fed refugee populations across 3 sectors. They had no military installations, no strategic value except for the food they grew, and the hospital complexes his organization had built there. Who's attacking them? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. HFY battle fleets, sir. They came out of nowhere. Orbital bombardment has already started. Marcus ran to the bridge, Sarah close behind him. The main screen showed 3 separate video feeds from the colonies. What he saw made his hands shake with rage and helplessness. The HFY weren't just attacking military targets. They were deliberately hitting hospitals, schools, and refugee centers. Marcus watched in horror as the children's hospital on New Eden, a facility he had personally helped design, disappeared in a ball of fire. "Set course for New Eden maximum speed," he ordered. "Sir, that will take us 18 hours at full speed," his navigator replied. "Then we'll be 18 hours too late," Marcus said quietly. On Terra Nova, the camera feed showed HFY landing craft dropping troops directly onto refugee camps. These weren't soldiers fighting soldiers. This was slaughter. Families ran, screaming as armored HFY warriors cut them down with energy weapons. Marcus had treated thousands of war wounded over the years. He thought he had seen the worst that civilized beings could do to each other. He was wrong. His communications officer interrupted his dark thoughts. "Sir, we're getting a direct transmission from the HFY fleet. It's addressed to all human vessels." "Put it through." War Commander Thaxon's scarred face filled the screen. Behind him, Marcus could see HFY officers celebrating as they watched the colony attacks on their own monitors. "Humans," Thaxon said, his voice filled with satisfaction. "You spoke pretty words about peace and cooperation. Now you see what those words are worth. Your colonies burn because you are weak. Your people die because you have no strength to protect them." Marcus stepped forward. "Those are civilian targets, Thaxon. Hospitals and schools. There are children down there." "Yes," the HFY commander replied. "And they make excellent examples. Surrender now and perhaps some of your other colonies will be spared. Continue to resist, and every human world will share this fate." The transmission ended. Marcus stared at the blank screen, feeling something cold and hard forming in his chest. Around him, his crew, humans and aliens who had worked together for years to save lives, stood in shocked silence. Meanwhile, on the Confederation station, Ambassador Elena Vasquez was fighting a different kind of battle. "Emergency session," she called out as she ran through the corridors. "We need an emergency session now." But the response was not what she had hoped for. When the delegates finally gathered, their faces showed sympathy mixed with fear. No one wanted to anger the HFY hegemony. "This is a tragedy," said Ambassador Kresh, his blue skin pale with stress. "But the Confederation cannot intervene in every local conflict." "Local conflict?" Elena's voice rose higher than she intended. "They're targeting civilian populations. They're bombing hospitals." "Which is terrible," replied the hegemony delegate, a spider-like creature whose species often allied with the HFY. "But perhaps humanity should have considered the consequences of their weakness before now." Elena felt the room turning against her. These species had watched humanity help and heal for 30 years. Now, when humans needed help, they were being abandoned. She made one final desperate plea. "If you won't help us militarily, at least condemn the attacks. Make it clear that targeting civilians is unacceptable." The vote was close, but it failed. Too many species were afraid of HFY retaliation. Others quietly approved of seeing humanity brought down to size. Elena left the session feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. On Earth, the Global Defense Council met in emergency session. President Sarah Okafor watched the feeds from the attacked colonies with an expression that reminded observers of carved stone. "How many casualties?" she asked quietly. "Current estimates suggest 40,000 dead on New Eden alone," replied Defense Minister James Crawford. "The other colonies are still being hit. Communications are spotty, but we're looking at hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths." "And our response options?" Minister Crawford's face was grim. "Conventional diplomatic. Response is failing. Ambassador Vasquez reports the Confederation won't intervene. The HFY are demanding complete surrender and slavery for our entire species." "Military options?" Limited, according to public records. Our fleet consists mainly of medical ships, cargo vessels, and research platforms. The HFY have a 40-to-1 advantage in visible military assets. President Okafor was quiet for a long moment. What about invisible assets? Ma'am. You heard me, James. What about the assets that don't appear on public records? Defense. Minister Crawford looked around the room. Every person present had maximum security clearance, but what the president was asking about went beyond even that. Ma'am, if we activate those protocols, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again. The galaxy is already watching our children die, President Okafor replied. Send one final diplomatic message to the HFY. Offer them everything: territory, resources, technology, tribute payments. Give them every possible chance to step back from this. The message went out within the hour. Earth offered the HFY everything they had asked for and more: complete access to human agricultural worlds, advanced medical technology, even territorial concessions that would give the HFY strategic advantages across multiple sectors. The response came back 6 hours later. Instead of words, it was a video feed. The HFY had found the refugee shelters on Harvest Moon, where families from New Eden and Terra Nova had fled. War Commander Thakzon himself stood in front of the largest shelter as his troops set it on fire. This is what human weakness looks like, he said directly to the camera. Your offers mean nothing. Surrender completely, or watch every human world burn. President Okafor watched the transmission with her full cabinet. When it ended, the room was completely silent. Draft an order, she said finally. All human civilians in contested space are to be evacuated immediately. All diplomatic personnel are to withdraw to safe zones. All military and civilian assets are to implement Emergency Protocol 7. Ma'am, Defense Minister Crawford said, carefully. Protocol 7 hasn't been used since the Titan War 300 years ago. Are you absolutely certain? President Okafor thought about the children burning on Harvest Moon. She thought about Captain Chen and thousands of other humans who had spent their lives helping others, only to be thanked with slaughter. I'm certain. And James? Send a message to Admiral Chen. Tell her it's time to come home. Yes, ma'am. And the final diplomatic message to the HFY? President Okafor's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Tell them that humanity tried peace. Tell them we offered everything we had to avoid this moment. And tell them that what happens next is on their heads, not ours. The message went out on all frequencies, directed not just to the HFY but to the entire galaxy. This is Earth to all who can hear this transmission. Humanity has exhausted all peaceful options. We offered everything and were answered with the murder of our innocents. As of now, Emergency Protocol 7 is in effect. All civilian personnel are directed to evacuate contested zones immediately. All military assets are directed to full activation status. We tried to build a galaxy based on cooperation and mutual aid. Some have chosen a different path. They will face the consequences of that choice. The transmission ended. Across human space, ships that had carried medicine for decades began to change. Space stations that had been devoted to research powered up weapon systems that shouldn't have existed. And somewhere in the deep black between the stars, Admiral Sarah Chen received a message she had hoped would never come. War Commander Thakzon intercepted the human transmission and laughed. Protocol 7? More human nonsense. Double our attack. Schedule. I want every human world burning within the week. He had no idea what he had just unleashed upon the galaxy. The change began quietly, like dawn breaking across a sleeping world. Dr. Zentar, a Selenite medical researcher who had worked aboard the Harmony for 5 years, noticed it first. He floated into the medical bay for his morning shift and found Captain Chen standing before a wall panel that Zentar had never seen open before. Captain? Zentar's voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Is everything all right? Marcus turned to face his longtime colleague. The human's expression was calm, but something fundamental had changed in his eyes. They held a weight that hadn't been there yesterday. Zentar, I need you and the other non-human crew members to gather in conference room C. There's something you all need to know. 20 minutes later, Zentar sat with 16 other alien crew members as Captain Chen addressed them. The humans on the crew were notably absent. Friends, Marcus began, you have served alongside humanity for years. Many of you have become like family to us. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to understand, but you need to hear it. He activated a holographic display showing the Harmony's technical specifications, blueprints that Zentar had seen dozens of times during maintenance procedures. This is what you think our ship looks like, Marcus said. Then he input a new command and the hologram changed completely. Where before there had been medical bays, Zentar now saw weapons manufacturing facilities. Where there had been research labs, he saw ammunition storage. Where there had been peaceful quarters for injured patients, he saw barracks designed for combat troops. The Harmony is not actually a medical ship, Marcus said quietly. Her real name is the UES Retribution, and she is one of the most advanced weapons platforms ever built. Dr. Kesahai, a mantis-like surgeon from the Outer Rim, clicked her mandibles in distress. But we have treated thousands of patients aboard this vessel. I have performed surgery in those medical bays myself. Yes, Marcus replied. And every word of healing you provided was real. But those medical bays were designed to convert to weapons production in less than 6 hours. We built this ship. We built all our ships to serve dual purposes. Zentar felt his consciousness flickering with confusion. Why? Why would you deceive us? Marcus's expression grew sad. Because humanity hoped we would never need the weapons. We wanted to be healers and builders and teachers. We wanted to live in a galaxy where strength was measured by how much you could help others, not by how much you could hurt them. The hologram changed again, showing similar transformations occurring across human space. Cargo ships revealed themselves as massive troop transports. Research stations sprouted defensive weapons that dwarfed anything in the Confederation's military. Agricultural colonies showed underground facilities that looked disturbingly military. 30 years ago, when we first made contact with Galactic civilization, humanity made a choice, Marcus continued. We could reveal our true nature and likely start an arms race that would destroy the peace we all enjoyed. Or we could hide our capabilities and try to build something better. We chose to hide. Every human ship, every station, every colony was built with dual purposes. We became healers and teachers and farmers, but we never forgot how to be soldiers. Dr. Zentar's voice was barely a whisper. The Kethvar attack. This is why you're revealing this now? Yes. 47,000 human civilians died in the first wave of attacks. Families, children, elderly people who never hurt anyone in their lives. The Kethvar deliberately targeted hospitals and schools to show that they would show no mercy to the innocent. Marcus paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a terrible finality. Humanity offered them everything, our worlds, our resources, our technology, even our freedom. We would have become slaves to save those lives, but they answered our offer by burning more children alive. The alien crew members sat in stunned silence. Zentar tried to process what he was hearing. The gentle humans he had worked with for years, healers who had saved his own life twice, were apparently one of the most dangerous military forces in the galaxy. What happens to us? Asked Chief Engineer Borthak, a massive, rock-like being who had helped maintain the ship's systems. That's your choice, Marcus replied. We can drop you off at any neutral station you choose. We'll provide full documentation of your service and letters of recommendation, or, he hesitated, you can stay and help us save the patients who are still aboard. We have 300 wounded from various conflicts in our medical bays. They need to be evacuated before we fully convert to military operations. Dr. Kesahai stood up on her 4 legs. I took an oath to preserve life, Captain. I will help evacuate the patients. But after that you should get as far away from us as possible. Marcus finished for her. What's coming next won't be safe for anyone. Similar conversations were happening across human space. On research stations, alien scientists learned that Their peaceful colleagues had been operating military installations. On cargo ships, alien traders discovered they had been working aboard troop transports. On agricultural worlds, alien farmers found out they had been living above vast underground military complexes. The reactions varied. Some aliens felt betrayed and left immediately. Others, like Dr. Zentar, chose to help with evacuations before departing. A few, especially those who had lost friends and family to various galactic conflicts, asked to stay and help. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Admiral Sarah Chen had been in deep space for 8 years on what the galaxy believed was a peaceful exploration mission. The Human Deep Space Survey had mapped distant star systems, cataloged new planets, and established communication relays in the galaxy's outer reaches. The truth was very different. Admiral Chen commanded a fleet of 10,000 ships that had been positioned across the galaxy over the course of 3 decades. They had mapped every Kethvar military installation, every supply route, every strategic choke point. They knew the location of every hegemony warship, the capacity of every Kethvar shipyard, the deployment schedule of every enemy fleet. When the Emergency Protocol 7 message reached her flagship Resolution, Admiral Chen was 3 light years from the Kethvar homeworld. She had been waiting there for 2 years. "Signal all ships," she ordered her communications officer. "Begin final approach. Execute Battle Plan Omega." "Ma'am," replied Commander Torres, her executive officer. "That plan calls for simultaneous strikes on 417 targets across 47 star systems. Are you sure we can coordinate something that complex?" Admiral Chen looked at the holographic display showing Kethvar space. Red dots marked every military installation, every fleet position, every supply depot. Green dots showed the positions of human ships that had been slowly, quietly moving into position for years. "Commander, we've been preparing for this operation for 30 years. Every human ship in this galaxy knows its target and its timing. Every supply cache has been pre-positioned. Every contingency has been planned for." She paused, thinking about her brother Marcus and the medical ship that was probably converting to military configuration even now. The Kethvar think they're fighting peaceful farmers and doctors. They have no idea they just declared war on a species that has been preparing for this exact scenario since before they were born. On the Confederation station, Ambassador Elena Vasquez received an encrypted message from Earth. It contained new diplomatic credentials and a very different set of instructions. For 30 years, she had been Earth's voice of peace and cooperation. Now she was something else entirely. She walked to the main assembly hall where War Commander Thaxon was holding court, boasting about his easy victories over human colonies. Other hegemony species were congratulating him on his brilliant strategy. "War Commander," Helena said, her voice carrying clearly across the hall. Thaxon turned to face her, his scarred face showing amusement. "The human ambassador, have you come to surrender to beg for mercy for your pathetic species?" "No," Elena replied calmly. "I've come to give you one final chance to surrender." The hall erupted in laughter. Thaxon's amusement turned to anger. "You dare mock me? Your colonies burn. Your people die. You have nothing left to threaten me with." Elena smiled, and something in that expression made the laughter die away. "War Commander, you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. You assumed that what you could see was all that existed. You attacked us based on our public capabilities, not our actual ones." "What are you talking about, human?" "I'm talking about the fact that in approximately 4 hours the Kethvar hegemony will cease to exist as a functioning government. I'm talking about the fact that every military installation in your empire is currently being surrounded by forces you never knew existed. I'm talking about the fact that humanity has been preparing for this exact scenario for longer than your species has had spaceflight." Thaxon's face went from anger to confusion to something that might have been fear. "Impossible. We monitored your fleets. We know your capabilities." "You monitored what we wanted you to monitor," Elena replied. "You fought the enemy you expected to find, not the enemy that actually exists." Her communicator chimed softly. She looked at it and nodded. "And War Commander, the attack on your homeworld began 3 minutes ago. War Commander Thakzon stared at Ambassador Elena Vasquez as if she had just claimed the stars would fall from the sky. Around them, the Confederation Assembly Hall had gone completely silent. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Human tricks, desperate words from a defeated species. Elena's communicator chimed again. She glanced at it and her smile grew wider. "Your flagship Dominant Pride just lost main power. Admiral Chen sends her regards." Thakzon's scarred face went pale. The Dominant Pride was in orbit around the Kethvar, homeworld, protected by their most advanced defense systems. It was impossible for any enemy force to get close enough to. His own communicator exploded with panicked transmissions. His officers were screaming about human ships appearing out of nowhere, about weapon systems being disabled with surgical precision, about fleets that had somehow bypassed every early warning system. "This cannot be happening," he whispered. Elena's expression remained calm, but her eyes held no mercy. "This is what happens when you mistake restraint for weakness, War Commander." Across the galaxy, the operation that Admiral Sarah Chen had codenamed Final Lesson was unfolding with clockwork precision. In the Helix Nebula, War Commander Thakzon's personal battle fleet of 50,000 ships was moving toward Earth for what he had planned as the final, crushing blow against humanity. They expected to face a desperate defense by converted cargo ships and medical vessels. Instead, they found Admiral Chen waiting for them with 10,000 ships that looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The human vessels were sleek and deadly, their hull design speaking of centuries of military engineering. They moved with a coordination that suggested battles fought and won in places the galaxy had never known existed. "This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Fleet," came the transmission to Thakzon's approaching armada. "You have committed acts of genocide against civilian populations. You have rejected all offers of peaceful resolution. You have chosen to make war against humanity. You will now face the consequences of that choice." The Battle of the Helix Nebula lasted exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds. The Kethvar fleet outnumbered the humans 5-1, but numbers meant nothing when your enemy knew exactly where you were going to be and how you were going to fight. Human ships moved like they were dancing to music only they could hear. They targeted specific systems on Kethvar vessels, engines, weapons, life support, with an accuracy that spoke of intimate knowledge of enemy ship design. Kethvar commanders found their vessels disabled rather than destroyed, their crews alive but helpless. It wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. Thakzon watched from his command center as his mighty fleet was systematically neutralized. Ship after ship went dark, their weapons offline, their engines dead. But the human ships weren't just destroying them, they were capturing them intact. "How?" he breathed, as he watched centuries of Kethvar military superiority crumble in less than 20 minutes. His communications officer provided the answer, though she barely believed it herself. "Sir, our ship's computer systems. The humans have access codes. They're shutting down our vessels from the inside." "Access codes? How could they have—" Thakzon stopped as understanding dawned. "The trade agreements, the cultural exchanges, the medical aid—" "Yes, sir. Every time we allowed human technicians aboard our ships for humanitarian assistance, they were mapping our systems. Every trade negotiation where they examined our technology for compatibility studies was actually intelligence gathering. Every peace treaty where we shared technical specifications was feeding them data." Thakzon felt something cold settle in his chest. 30 years. They've been preparing for this for 30 years. His flagship shuddered as human ships surrounded it. Through the viewports he could see vessels that shouldn't exist, sleek predators that made his massive dreadnought look clumsy and outdated. A new transmission came through. This one showed a human woman in military uniform, her expression professional but implacable. "War Commander Thakzon, this is Admiral Sarah Chen. Your fleet is neutralized. Your home system is under human control. Your government has fallen. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions." "And if I refuse?" Thakzon asked. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "Then you will discover why humanity learned to wage war before we learned to fly between stars." But the space battle was only part of what was happening across Kethvar space. On 47 worlds, Kethvar military installations that had stood for centuries were falling to forces that seemed to materialize from thin air. Human troops emerged from positions they had held for years. Soldiers who had posed as diplomats, traders, cultural attachés, and medical personnel. Every peaceful mission humanity had sent to Kethvar space had been reconnaissance. Every cultural exchange had been military intelligence gathering. Every humanitarian aid mission had been positioning strategic assets. On the Kethvar homeworld itself, the planetary defense grid that had never been penetrated simply went offline. Human commandos who had been living in the capital city for decades activated, taking control of key communication centers and government buildings. The massive Kethvar war machine, built over 8 centuries of conquest, was dismantled in 72 hours. Captain Marcus Chen, aboard the now-revealed UES Retribution, led the assault on the military shipyards in the Kethvar home system. His ship, which had spent years docked at these same facilities while providing medical aid, knew every defensive measure and every structural weakness. "Target the shipyard command centers," he ordered. "Precision strikes only. We want to capture the facilities intact." His weapons officer looked up from her console. "Sir, we're reading massive civilian populations in the surrounding areas." "Then, we make sure none of them get hurt," Marcus replied firmly. "We're not the Kethvar. We don't wage war against innocents." The human attacks were surgical in their precision. Military targets were neutralized while civilian areas remained untouched. Kethvar soldiers found themselves captured rather than killed, treated for wounds rather than executed. It was a mercy that confused many Kethvar commanders. They had built their reputation on ruthless efficiency and total victory. The idea that an enemy would show restraint even in overwhelming victory was alien to them. On the Confederation station, the emergency assembly was watching real-time feeds of the conflict with stunned disbelief. Species that had known humanity for 3 decades were seeing them in an entirely new light. "How is this possible?" whispered Ambassador Kresh, his blue skin now pale with shock. "Where did these ships come from, these soldiers, these weapons?" Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the assembly, no longer the humble peace advocate she had pretended to be for so many years. "They came from the same place our medical ships came from, Kresh. The same place our agricultural colonies and our trade vessels came from. Humanity has always been exactly what we are. You just saw what you wanted to see." She activated a holographic display that showed the true scope of human presence in the galaxy. What had appeared to be scattered, peaceful settlements revealed themselves as a coordinated military network spanning hundreds of star systems. "Every human installation in this galaxy serves a dual purpose," Elena continued. "We are farmers who can become soldiers. We are doctors who can become warriors. We are diplomats who can become generals. We built our civilization around the hope that we would never need those secondary capabilities. The Kethvar made that hope impossible." War Commander Thaxon's transmission came through on the main screen. His scarred face showed defeat and something that might have been respect. "I surrender," he said simply. "My fleets surrender. My worlds surrender. Humanity has taught us a lesson we will not forget." Elena nodded. "Your surrender is accepted, War Commander. Your soldiers will be treated well. Your wounded will be cared for. Your civilians will be protected. This is how humanity wages war. We win decisively, but we do not become monsters in the process." She turned to address the full assembly. "Let this be a lesson to all who would choose violence over diplomacy. Humanity will always prefer peace. We will negotiate, compromise, and sacrifice to avoid conflict. But if you force us to war, you will face not just our current strength, but the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years of warfare. We hope this lesson will not need to be repeated." In the aftermath of the battle, as Kethvar survivors were processed and their wounded treated by the same human medical ships that had been caring for them for years, one question echoed through every civilized world in the galaxy. If humanity could do this to the mighty Kethvar hegemony in less than 3 days, what could they do to anyone else who threatened the peace? The answer as every military planner in the galaxy was beginning to realize, was anything they wanted. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Humanity had revealed itself not as the galaxy's conscience, but as its hidden protector, one that preferred healing to hurting, but was fully capable of both. And somewhere in the deep black between the stars, other aggressive species quietly began reconsidering their expansion plans. 3 months after the Battle of the Helix Nebula, the Galactic Confederation headquarters felt like a different place entirely. The same crystal halls echoed with the same footsteps, but the conversations had changed. The balance of power had shifted in ways that most species were still trying to understand. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through corridors where she had once been seen as the idealistic peacenik.
Now, other delegates stepped aside when they saw her coming. Not out of fear exactly, but out of a new kind of respect that came with the knowledge of what humanity was truly capable of. She was heading to the most important session of her career.
The formal address to the full Confederation Assembly about humanity's place in the new galactic order. The assembly hall was packed. Every species in the galaxy had sent representatives. In the front rows sat former HFY commanders, including War Commander Thakzon himself. The once proud warrior looked different now, humbled, but not broken. His scarred face showed something Elena had never seen there before: thoughtful consideration. Elena took her place at the central podium and looked out at the hundreds of faces watching her. Some showed curiosity, others concern, and a few barely concealed fear. "Friends and colleagues," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. 30 years ago, humanity joined this confederation with hope in our hearts. We believed we could build a galaxy based on cooperation, mutual aid, and peaceful resolution of conflicts. We still believe that, but recent events have forced us to reveal truths we had hoped to keep hidden forever. She activated a holographic display showing images from Earth's history, ancient battles, medieval wars, industrial conflicts, and finally the devastating global wars that had nearly destroyed her homeworld. Humanity did not come to the stars as innocent children. We came as survivors of conflicts that would horrify most of you. We fought wars with weapons that could destroy continents. We developed strategies that could topple civilizations. We learned lessons written in the blood of billions of our own kind. The hall was completely silent. Elena could see delegates shifting uncomfortably as they processed what she was telling them. When we reached the stars and found this galaxy full of life and wonder, we made a choice. We could use our knowledge of warfare to dominate and conquer, as so many species do. Or we could try to build something better. We chose to hide our fangs and extend our hands instead. She changed the display to show human colonies, medical ships, and research stations as they truly were, dual-purpose installations that could switch from healing to warfare at a moment's notice. Every human facility in this galaxy was designed with both purposes in mind. We became the galaxy's doctors, farmers, teachers, and mediators. But we never forgot how to be soldiers. We simply hoped we would never need to remember. War Commander. Thakzon stood up slowly. Elena nodded to acknowledge him. "Ambassador," he said, his gravelly voice carrying across the hall. "My species has known only one way to exist, through strength and conquest. You showed us that there is another way to be strong. But you also showed us that mercy can be more terrifying than cruelty." Elena studied his scarred face. "How so, War Commander?" "Because when you defeated us, you chose not to destroy us. You treated our wounded. You protected our civilians. You showed us that your strength comes not from your ability to hurt, but from your choice not to hurt when you easily could." Thakzon's voice grew quieter. "That is a kind of power my people never understood. It is more frightening than any weapon." Elena nodded. "That is the lesson we hoped you would learn, War Commander. True strength is not about how much damage you can cause. It's about how much damage you can prevent." She turned back to address the full assembly. "The HFY war is over. Their military is dismantled, their aggressive expansion ended. But we have not enslaved them or destroyed their culture. Instead, we are helping them rebuild into something better." The display showed images of former Kethvar military bases being converted into research facilities and agricultural centers. Human engineers worked alongside Kethvar workers to transform weapons factories into medical equipment manufacturing plants. War Commander Thakzan now leads a planetary reconstruction effort. His tactical brilliance is being used to coordinate relief efforts for war refugees. His knowledge of military logistics is helping establish trade routes that will benefit his entire species. This is how humanity prefers to win wars, by turning enemies into allies, conquest into cooperation. Ambassador Kresh from the Zephyrian delegation raised his hand. Elena recognized him. "Ambassador Vasquez," Kresh said, his blue skin showing the stress patterns of deep concern. "What you've shown us changes everything. If humanity has been this capable for 3 decades, what does that mean for the rest of us? Should we fear human expansion? Human domination?" Elena had been expecting this question. "Kresh, in 30 years of contact, has humanity ever demanded tribute from you? Have we claimed your territory? Have we insisted you change your government or your culture to match ours?" "No," Kresh admitted. "We have the power to do all of those things now," Elena continued. "Our fleets could reach any world in this galaxy within weeks. Our technology could overwhelm any defense, but we won't because conquest was never our goal. Humanity wants the same thing we have always wanted. A galaxy where species can grow and flourish without fear. The only difference now is that we have revealed our capability to protect that vision." The questions continued for hours. Species after species asked about humanity's intentions, their hidden capabilities, their plans for the future. Elena answered, each one patiently, honestly. Finally, the session was coming to an end. Elena prepared to deliver her closing statement, words that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come. "Before I close," she said, "I want to address the fear I see in some of your faces. You're wondering if humanity will become the galaxy's new overlords if we'll use our revealed strength to dominate as others have done. I understand that fear. It's reasonable given what you've learned about us, but consider this: we have had the power to conquer this galaxy for 30 years. Instead, we chose to heal it. We spent 3 decades treating your wounded, feeding your hungry, mediating your conflicts, and teaching your children. We built hospitals on your worlds and established research stations to benefit all species. We did this not because we were weak, but because we chose to be something better than the sum of our weapons." She paused, looking directly at the delegates from the more aggressive species. "Humanity will continue to be what we have always been: healers, builders, teachers, and protectors. But now you know that when we offer our protection, it is backed by genuine strength. When we advocate for peace, it is not because we cannot win wars, but because we understand their true cost. We hope this knowledge will make future conflicts unnecessary, but if they do occur..." Elena's expression hardened slightly. "If any species chooses to threaten innocent lives, to target civilians, to wage war against the defenseless, they will face the same fate as the Kethvar hegemony: swift, decisive, and permanent defeat." The Assembly voted unanimously to accept humanity's new role as the Confederation's primary peacekeeping force. It wasn't really a choice. Everyone understood that humanity already held that position, whether it was officially recognized or not. As the delegates filed out, Elena noticed several groups forming informal conversations. Military planners from aggressive species were talking quietly with each other, their expressions thoughtful. She suspected they were reconsidering expansion, plans that might bring them into conflict with human interests. Ambassador Kresh approached her as the hall emptied. "Elena," he said quietly, "I've known you for 15 years. I considered you a friend. I thought I understood you. You did understand me, Kresh, and you still do. I'm the same person who has spent years mediating your trade disputes and helping negotiate your treaties. The only thing that's changed is what you know about my species' capabilities." Kresh studied her face. "And that doesn't change how you see us? Knowing that you could simply take what you want instead of negotiating for it?" Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked like the earnest diplomat Kresh had known for so many. Years. Kresh, my friend, the fact that we can take what we want is exactly why we choose to ask for it instead. That's what makes us human. 6 months later, Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as it approached a disputed system on the edge of Confederation space. Two species were fighting over mining rights to several asteroid fields. Ships on both sides had been destroyed, and civilian casualties were mounting. But this time, Marcus wasn't approaching as the captain of a medical vessel. The Retribution flew openly as a warship, its weapons visible and its military nature undisguised. Flanking it were 6 other human vessels, also revealing their true nature for the first time. "This is Captain Chen of the Human Peacekeeping Force, he transmitted to both fleets. "You are ordered to cease hostilities immediately and withdraw to neutral zones. Humanitarian vessels are en route to assist wounded from both sides." The response came quickly from both fleet commanders. Within an hour, the fighting had stopped. Both sides agreed to mediation talks. No threats were needed, no weapons fired. The mere presence of human ships, and the knowledge of what those ships could do, was enough. Marcus smiled as he watched the former enemies beginning rescue operations for each other's wounded. This was what his sister Admiral Chen had envisioned. When they planned the revelation, not conquest through fear, but peace through strength. On Earth, President Okafor met with her cabinet to review reports from across the galaxy. Aggressive species were scaling back expansion plans. Trade disputes were being settled through negotiation rather than warfare. 3 separate conflicts had ended simply because human peacekeeping forces had appeared in the contested systems. "It's working," Defense Minister Crawford reported. "Military conflicts are down 60% galaxy-wide. Most species are choosing diplomatic solutions rather than risk human intervention." President Okafor nodded, but her expression remained serious. "And the cost?" "Minimal, so far. We've had to reveal the true nature of approximately 30% of our installations. The rest remain disguised as civilian facilities. If needed, we can still respond to threats the galaxy doesn't see coming." "Good." The goal was never to rule through fear, but to create an environment where fear was unnecessary. It seems we're succeeding. President Okafor looked out the window at the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere. Somewhere out there, human ships continued their missions, some open in their military nature, others still disguised as peaceful vessels. Both were necessary parts of the new balance. Humanity had finally found a way to use their greatest talent, warfare, in service of their greatest desire, peace. And across the galaxy, species that had once seen strength only as a tool for domination were slowly learning that the greatest strength of all was the wisdom to choose when not to use it. The age of human peace had begun, not because humanity was weak, but because they were so strong that they could afford to be gentle. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget.